This week is the first in a three-part series. I look back through all my records. I cannot believe I have never done this series. It is 3 simple rules. The first we're going to deal with today is do no harm. Next week we'll be talking about do good, and the week after that we will talk about staying in love with God. These come from John Wesley. It's part of one of the many things that he gives us. This whole idea of simplifying and method and rules. Wesley tried to cut things down to their simplest form, but to do it repeatedly over and over and over again. And so these 3 simple rules, if you can accomplish these 3 simple rules, you will be 95% of the way there to being a really great Christian. So, when you say these rules, they make perfect sense. Do no harm. That is simple and easy, and should be easy to accomplish. So I don't think I really need to go over the basic stuff of do no harm. I think you'll know what that is. But I want to dig a little bit deeper into do no harm. So the writer of Romans gave us a whole list of commandments. The Bible, the Old Testament, is full of a lot of rules and laws that we are not supposed to do. Thou shalt not kill. Do not covet. There's just a huge, there's the simple 10 list, but there's hundreds after that. In fact, there's even in Leviticus something about don't eat badgers. I don't exactly understand that, but later today at lunch, remember? Badger is off the menu. So when we talk about this, do no harm, we have a whole list in our head of the things that we shouldn't do. Now, do I fulfill that list? No, not always. I fall short. I am completely human. You're completely human. You have those moments. But when we dig a little bit deeper and we look at it a little bit closer, we begin to see things from a different perspective. So, when you're in the grocery store and you're buying, tomatoes, strawberries, does do no harm cross your mind? When you go to the store, when you go to wherever it is that you go to get coffee, if you're a coffee drinker, do you think of do no harm? When you do these things, it is difficult to put into perspective the whole idea of do no harm. Because it's a strawberry, it's a tomato, it's a cup of coffee, it's a pickle. What does it matter, Pastor? But when we're talking about doing no harm, and we really dig deep into it, we need to think about things as simple as strawberries and tomatoes and pickles and where our coffee comes from. Because there are human beings who are involved in all of those situations. And so we have to ask ourselves the question, is this tomato that I am buying, the people who planted it, the people who picked it, the person who packaged it, the people who shipped it, the people who unloaded it and put it on the shelf, were all of those people treated with respect? Or by buying this tomato, am I doing harm? Tomatoes are something that are available year-round. You can go into the store any day of the year and pick up a tomato. And you expect your tomato to be, if you are a tomato person, or if you're a strawberry person, or if you're a coffee person, you expect your tomato or coffee or strawberry to be in a certain price range. And if it goes out of that price range, you're upset. So the grocer knows what that price range is, and the grocer tries to keep it in that price range. The price of a tomato in August is about the same as the price of a tomato in March. Although that tomato has had to travel significantly farther in March than it did in August. In August, you can find a tomato that is grown locally. In fact, stores try and source local sources for food. But in the wintertime, when you want a tomato, it had to come a lot further, but the price remains the same. Does that mean a farmer is taking a loss, or does that mean a worker who picked it gets paid less? Is that doing harm? Or coffee. Coffee comes from far away. Coffee comes from all over the place. It comes from islands, Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic. It comes from South America. It comes from Africa. The coffee that you drink, the beans that were grown and picked, was the person who grew it paid a living wage? Was the person who picked it paid a living wage? Or is that cheap cup of coffee at the expense of somebody else? But Pastor, I can't think about that. Okay, that's fine. You don't have to think about that. Think about this. How about at work? Have you ever wanted to better yourself at work? To be in a higher position? To move up the ladder, as it were? Did you have to do harm to move up that ladder? Did you step on the shoulders or hands or feet of somebody else on the way up that ladder? Oh, Pastor, we can't be thinking about that. All right, think about this. This is participation time in the service. You're going to raise a hand if this is you. If you've ever been close to somebody or had to deal with someone with cancer, raise your hand. Look around. Look at the hands that are in the air. Look in the back. It's the majority of us. There's more of us that have been touched by it. And yet, have we done harm by the words that we use? Have we done harm by how it is that we treat people? How can you do harm to somebody with cancer? Well, sometimes our words aren't the best. Sometimes we treat somebody differently when they're sick. Sometimes we just don't even think about it. And that's what I'm saying to you when I say do no harm. It's to be conscious about the things that we're doing. Oh, Pastor, that doesn't really apply to me. All right. If you watch TV, Uh-oh, Pastor, you're getting close now. Careful. Amusement. Amusement is something that we say, well, I just do it for amusement. To forget about the world for a little bit. In doing that, are you doing harm? Are you harming somebody else? Are you harming yourself? Do you spend too much time in front of the TV? Yes, I do. Do you spend too much time with that sport or game that is important to you? Do you spend too much time with work so that you can move up that ladder? And who does it harm when you do? Who is it in your life that it does harm to? You see, when we think of do no harm and we keep it simple, it's easy to say, well, yeah, I don't do harm. But when we dig deeper, we find ourselves thinking about others who we interact with, and maybe people we don't even interact with, but because we're humans, we're connected. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a Lutheran minister during World War II. He was a unique theologian. He loved God. He loved God with his whole heart. And he was alive during World War II. And he fought to save Jews in Germany. In fact, he was part of a plot to assassinate Hitler. He was hanged in 1945. I'm going to read you just a few of his words. We must learn to regard people less in the light of what they do or omit to do, and more in the light of what they suffer. Judging others makes us blind, whereas love is illuminating. When we judge other people, we have a tendency to skim over it. Oh, well, we can disregard that person. You know how he is. Doing harm. Doing harm with our words and our actions in everyday life. And when you really think about it, it becomes overwhelming. What do you mean I have to think about where my jeans are made and who makes them and whether or not they can live life? What do you mean I have to think about where my food comes from and who produces it and who their workers are and whether or not they have a living wage? What do you mean I have to think about all of these things in my life? What do you mean I have to think about my neighbor and what they've been through when I have a problem with them not cutting their grass? Cut your grass. It's not that hard. But we don't know what they've been through, and we don't know where they're at. And when we reach out with love, when we help, you don't know whose life you'll be changing. It was fun watching the video of the little girl who received a shoebox. And in the shoebox was a study, and she was part of that study. And she wanted to share God with other people. She wanted to share God's love with somebody else. She found a little boy. And she shared God's love with the little boy. And because she shared God's love with the little boy, his whole family comes to church. It really is that simple. We get overwhelmed with the bigness. How can I affect whether or not somebody gets paid for picking coffee in a living wage? You can do it by making small choices here, changing people's lives, and that ripple effect spreads outward. You can pay attention and maybe purchase your coffee from somebody who pays attention to those things. Or asking the question and finding out who pays attention to those things. And voting with your dollar bills about doing no harm in our world. It's not easy. It's not easy for me to know that my shoes were made here in the United States. It's not easy for me to know that my pants were made in Malaysia, that my shirt was made in China, that my underwear were made in China, that my socks were made in China, that the undershirt that I'm wearing was made in Bangladesh. It's not easy. But it might just be important. It might just be important enough to know where things come from and what it's about, so that you're conscious of it. Because when you know about those things, you pay attention to the things that are close to you as well. And maybe you spend more time loving your neighbor, or loving your children or grandchildren, making those choices in our lives that help us to do no harm, that help us to see that God is at work every place, in every moment, with every decision that you make, and to begin to be aware. Yes, when somebody cuts you off, don't call them number one. That's an easy do no harm. But think about where that cup of coffee that's in the cup holder in your car comes from. Think about who picked the pickle that is on your hamburger at lunch. And remember, always, always avoid the badger on the menu. Will you pray with me? God of grace and mercy, thank you for this day. Help us to be good neighbors and to love as you have loved. In Jesus' name, amen. Before I send you on your way, I am supposed to remind you that Deitch's ice cream is going to be served right out here. And Deitch's ice cream, if you've never had it, is really good. I encourage you to be bad in this moment. Locally made product here in Findlay, put together by people in Findlay for your enjoyment out of materials and ingredients that were sourced locally. See, I did my research. And Judy and Don, thank you. Now, go forth from this place